probably heard this time and time again that credit cards are safer to use than debit cards. This is not completely true. So in today's video, I'm gonna show you protections that you have as a debit card user and a credit card user that banks don't want you to know about. In fact, all of the things that I will be mentioning in this video has saved me in the past. So in my younger days, I was actually pickpocketed in a nightclub in Las Vegas. I thought a girl was really into me, but she was just really into my wallet. So she stole my debit card and used it to buy some drinks and other things later that night. I didn't realize that my debit card was stolen until I returned back to our room. In a panic, I thought I was screwed and never see that money ever again. I froze my card and called my bank first thing in the morning and told them about the situation. And they told me that everything was gonna be okay and I would get the fraudulent charges returned back to my account. I have always heard not to use credit cards for anything because they don't offer the same protections as credit cards in case of fraud or identity theft, but in this scenario, I was protected somehow. When it comes to using debit cards and having unauthorized charges, there are limitations and you may be liable for some of those charges. This is where you need to act fast to be fully protected. There are plenty of ways for someone to use your debit card like they did with mine. You might think that someone would need your PIN to steal money from your debit card, but the truth is they don't. Debit transactions are hard to reverse compared to credit transactions. Whenever you use a debit card, you typically have the option to run the charge as a debit transaction or a credit transaction. Credit transactions are typically the same as a credit card where you would just have to swipe and no PIN is needed. This is exactly what happened to me. With fraud happening more and more frequently, you really have to be aware of your surroundings and know the rules and laws so you can get your money back. Credit card skimmers are becoming more and more common at gas stations, ATMs, and convenience stores. And every other week, you probably hear about a data breach where your personal information is compromised, and these are coming from huge companies. Honestly, it's just a matter of time until it happens. The problem with debit card fraud is that this is your main means of cash. Your account may be frozen until your issue is resolved. This could be a few days or even a couple of weeks, which can be a hassle for a lot of people. That's why I always recommend having at least a few accounts and not putting all of your eggs in one basket in case if something happens like this. Now let's go over what exactly your protections are in a case if you lose your ATM card or debit card and it gets used. Using this chart from the FTC's website, depending on when you reported lost or stolen, it will determine how much you are liable. If you report your card as lost before someone else uses it, then you're not responsible for any unauthorized charges. If you report your card as lost after someone uses it, then your liability depends on how quickly you reported it. If you report it within 2 business days after you learn about the loss or death, then your maximum loss is $50. If it's been more than 2 days after you learn about the loss or theft, but within 60 calendar days after your statement cycle is sent to you, then the maximum loss is $500. $500 is still quite a bit of money, but hopefully by that time you've noticed something already. If it's been more than 60 days after the statement has been sent to you, you'll be personally liable for all of the money taken from your ATM or debit account. So it is very important for you to review your statements and know where your ATM card is at all times. The only time that I need to use it, it's whenever I need to have cash. And even then, that's very rare. So reviewing your statements and banking transactions frequently is a key component of these protections. So going back to my story, since I was able to report the loss within 2 days, I was actually able to get all of those fraudulent charges refunded back to my account. But in reality, I could have been liable up to $50. So if your bank tried to pull some funny business, just make sure that you refer to this chart when you're speaking to them because this is coming directly from the Federal Trade Commission. Now, for me personally, I never recommend people just use a debit card just due to the fact that you have more limitations and fewer protections. Plus, you can have your funds on hold that you cannot use until they actually clear. For example, if you were to go to a gas station and use that debit card to pay for gas, sometimes there is a hold for an extra $50 or so until the charge for the gas clears. This is annoying because that $50, even though you did not use it, it prevents you from using it for a few days. This can actually happen to credit cards too, but when it comes to cash, it is way more restricting than it is credit. On the other hand, there are way more benefits in using a credit card. But the biggest scam that credit card issuers don't tell you is that you have protections that automatically apply to you no matter what. It does not matter if you have the worst credit card of all time or one of the best credit cards of all time, you're still covered. If you have a credit card or a charge card, you are fully protected under the Fair Credit Billing Act, also known as the SCBA. In a nutshell, this is a law that protects consumer from unfair billing practices. It covers unauthorized charges, charges with incorrect dates or amounts, and calculation errors. Now, let's take a look at a few credit cards here. The first one is the Credit One X5 card. Credit One is one of those predatory credit card companies that target people with subprime credit. So I would definitely not recommend any of their credit cards. But if you take a look at the advertisement, they advertise zero fraud liability, which means that you're not held responsible for any unauthorized charges. That's nice and all, but you're automatically protected no matter what. Some companies advertise benefits that you already have. Now let's take a look at a major bank, such as Chase, specifically their Chase Sapphire Preferred Card. Based on their advertisement, they offer purchase protection. This covers new purchases for up to 120 days against damage or death, up to $500 per claim, and $50,000 per account. Purchase protection is a little bit different from the protections that you have under the Fair Credit Billing Act. Purchase protection covers items that you bought with a credit card that gets damaged or stolen. The SCBA states that you'll be protected for charges that are not authorized by you, charges with a wrong date or amount, charges for goods and services that weren't delivered, goods and services that were received but were not as described, calculation errors, charges for which the consumer needs clarification, and billing statements delivered to an incorrect address. Certain credit cards make these protections even sweeter. I personally like American Express cards for their protections because they have the easiest and most streamlined process for filing claims. Not too long ago, I actually bought clothes from an outlet where there wasn't a return policy and all sales were final. Not realizing this until I got home, I called American Express and all I had to do was just submit a form, and a few days later, I got credited for those purchases. But there are certain rules that you have to follow to make sure that you are protected under the SCBA. Once you notice something is off, you have 60 days from the time that you receive your statement to dispute the charge with the lender. The charge must be over $50 to be eligible. This doesn't mean if you have a fraudulent charge under $50 that the credit card company won't credit you, but under this law, $50 is the minimum that you are liable for. To be fully protected, the complaint must be filed in writing. This is super important. I understand that this law was written back in the 70s and hasn't been really updated for today's modern age. However, if your credit card gets lost or stolen, you can dispute the charge over the phone rather than in writing. But it is still very important to file a complaint in writing to keep yourself fully protected. The lender or issuer has to let you know within 30 days that they received the complaint, and they have a full 90 days to complete an investigation. During this time, they are not allowed to try to collect the payment on a disputed amount, charge any interest on it, or report it to the credit bureaus as late. So it is crucial that once you know that there is a fraudulent charge or any charge for goods or services that weren't received or not as described, that you file a dispute. If you file a dispute and they report this as a late payment, this will be a great factual dispute that you can actually use to get that late payment removed. If the lender or issuer finds that the dispute is valid and correct, they must correct the error and refund any fees charged as a result. But if they find the dispute as invalid, they must explain their findings and provide you documentation within that 90-day time frame. If they don't meet this 90-day time frame or fail to provide you with the documentation, you may have a case to sue them. All of this information is extremely important, especially when it comes to credit repair or if you have any derogatory information that's tied to fraudulent charges. So here are the key takeaways from this video. Avoid using a debit card as much as possible. If you do use one, just make sure that time is very important if you do have any fraudulent charges on that card. Second is all credit cards have protections, whether or not they advertise them. Any unauthorized or any products or services that were never delivered or not as described, you have the right to dispute them in writing. Now, I do have a free community where I can help you with your credit journey no matter where you're at, which is called the Credit Collective. The link will be down in the description if you want to join. Again, it is completely free. So earlier, I mentioned how banks don't want you to know about the protections that you already have. If you have any derogatory information on your credit report, just make sure you check out these videos over here to help you with your credit repair and get your credit back on track. I'll see you over there.